So can the United States and Germany, two countries who make world-class computers and cars, learn from one another? And what can emerging economies learn from them? Our correspondent, Owen Fairclough, talked to innovation expert Joseph Mariathasan. He began by asking why the U.S. is a world-leading innovator.
That's been driven by the strength of not only Silicon Valley, but also other centers in the US. But Silicon Valley certainly stands out for innovation. And if you look at the so-called unicorns, 60% of them come from the US, and the majority of those are coming from Silicon Valley. And that, of course, is driven by immigration, a high-caliber immigration. The best and the brightest of the world often want to emigrate to the US.
We look at countries like Germany, which is renowned for making great cars, as I mentioned, then look at the US and think they make the world's leading computers. Why does it end up like that? Why do countries get renowned for certain products?
That's a very complicated question. And if you look at what's happened post-war, and you look at, say, the US, you could ask another question. Why did Britain never develop a mobile phone industry, but Finland did? And the answer to that, actually, is that post-war, 70% possibly of, say, the UK's physicists and engineers were consumed by the defense industry. So what you found in the UK, for example, that it wanted to punch above its weight, and therefore it developed a very strong defense industry. But that perhaps was at the expense of opportunities elsewhere. So you take some of the technologies used in, say, mobile phones. Code division multiple access, for example, is a way of splitting the radio spectrum into different buckets for lots of people to use that. Now, that was developed in the UK as a battlefield secret communication system. In Finland, they used the technology to create mobile phones.
And is it governments that take the lead here? For example, you mentioned Britain. Is it the government that decides we'll use the best minds to create weapons, and in Finland, we'll use the best minds to create a mobile phone company?
Well, it certainly has been, absolutely. You can't ignore the role of government. If you look at Silicon Valley, for example, you can't ignore the role of the US government in stimulating the amount of activity in IT and telecommunications. And that really led to a lot of the developments you're seeing in Silicon Valley. So the government is critical in developing a lot of innovation technology. In the US, for example, if you look at SpaceX, it's doing incredibly well because of its contract with NASA.
Let's broaden things out a little bit. We're seeing emerging economies like China, like India, starting to develop their own technology for things like railways, for defense, for aviation and so on. Are they using any of these traditional models that we've talked about to guide their own innovation, or is it their own, are they forging their own path?
I think each country has got to forge its own path, but I think there's probably 5 key things that you need for innovation of the sort you're talking about. I mean, you need a large cities. You need sort of concentrations of people who are able to have a critical mass of people, ideas, and so on. You need a culture that also encourages risk-taking, and you certainly see that in the US. You're seeing that in London and in Oxford, Cambridge, parts of Europe, Berlin. You're seeing all that also in India and China. Actually, I was in China last month, and it's amazing to see the developments there and the sort of companies that are coming out of China. But you also need, as we said, you need some sort of heavy government expenditure that actually encourages certain types of basic research. And you also need top-rated universities. I mean, innovation comes out of highly intelligent people who have been trained exceptionally well and are in an arena or in an environment where they can actually bounce ideas off each other. And finally, you also need a favorable political and regulatory environment that sort of encourages the creation of new companies. And you're seeing all of those happen in China. For example, China is now producing huge amounts of very innovative hardware. If you look at smartphones, a lot of the technical developments now coming out of China. China, I think, will move into software fairly soon, and it will probably move into other arenas. I mean, healthcare, for example, a lot of healthcare innovation is being undertaken in China. And India, I think, will come through as well, but it's possibly still 10 years behind.